This is Greg Troutline with Marine Technology TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Neil Gordon, the CEO of the trade organization Subsea UK, which later this year will embark on a new adventure as the Global Underwater Hub, a new organization with already 13 million in funding. We'll hear a bit more on that later, but just to set the scene, the UK has a really strong maritime heritage, but today it also has underwater expertise that transcends offshore defense and research. Subsea UK has been around since about 2003, set up to champion the UK subsea industry, then representing a 2 billion capex industry in oil and gas. It was good timing, as it turns out, as the industry grew to £9 billion industry by 2013. Neil, to start, can you tell us a little bit more about the heritage of your organization?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, sure. The Subsea UK was formed back in 2003, as you mentioned there, but before Subsea UK was formed, there was an organisation in the northeast of Scotland around Aberdeen called the Scottish Subsea Technology Group, and that was a number of companies that used to come together and talk about technology, because there wasn't really a massive forum to talk about what the challenges, opportunities were. And this small group of about 30 or so companies came together and said, look, we need to do something a bit more joined up. So that's when government got involved in the initial part. So both UK government and Scottish government helped form this group, this organisation, and Subsea UK was born. So it had a little bit of seed funding to get it going for a couple of years. And the rest is history, really. We've grown the organisation to 300 members over the period, but as a real purpose in life, it was there to try and grow the subsea business in the UK, both domestically and around the world, and exports as well. So that's where it came from. So over that now almost 18 years that we've been going, we have managed to develop a very strong industry and an organisation as well. And the organisation, our headquarters are based in Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland, but we do have a UK-wide interest. Our remit is to, as the clue is in the title, of course, of the organisation, Subsea UK. So it's to connect the UK to the opportunities to broker and help companies win that business both here and overseas.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you became involved? If I understand correctly, you started out studying business, but became a commercial diver.
Yes, started out, my family owned business, and I had a great interest in business. And when I started out studying, by chance, I took a job, a summer job, with a company called Oceaneering. It was way back then. I won't say how many years ago it was, but I joined the company for a summer, and I thought, yeah, this looks quite interesting in the subsea side of things, because I had an interest in sports diving. And before too long, I got kind of hooked in the industry, and off I went to do my training in commercial diving. So that's how I got into the subsea industry for a start. Going back now to mid 80s, it would have been early 80s, mid 80s. So that was my first foray into the offshore industry. And over the years, I've worked in a whole host of different organizations, and spent quite a bit of time working in communication with the offshore industry on safety training, etc. And that was a good, let's say, grounding to understand how the offshore industry works, both offshore and onshore, how you communicate with those different groups. And then more recently, prior to me joining Subsea UK, I was running an organisation called the National Hyperbaric Centre, which really looked at testing, training, and trials of subsea equipment and processes, etc. So things like hyperbaric welding. It basically had a saturation diving system in a building, so we could run a simulated offshore operation, and we could test various things like welding procedures. And then there was lots of training and testing of equipment like subsea control modules as well. So again, that broadened my horizons on what was going off in the subsea sector. So that was a very interesting period, just to understand what goes on in that subsea world, because the subsea world is beneath the waves, and we often only see what we see on the surface, but there's a whole plethora of technology infrastructure that goes on beneath those waves as well.
If I understand correctly, you recently marked your 10th year as the CEO of Subsea UK. What have been the biggest changes that you've seen in this time?
Some of the biggest changes when I joined the industry, things were growing quite well, and the subsea industry has always been on a big growth spurt. But the oil and gas was the mainstay of the industry. Some of the technologies that have evolved came from the defense sector, but really the oil and gas industry harnessed the subsea, let's say, technology and how they really developed that, and that accelerated the growth of the industry massively. But some of the biggest challenges in the 10 years have seen the highs and lows of oil price. You see the peaks and troughs of industry going through those cycles, and those are sometimes the biggest challenges. Some of those challenges have been, opportunities, because we think about subsea technology and topside developments. Topside developments can be quite a capital heavy expenditure, but looking at subsea developments, for example, and particularly in the North Sea, where there was a lot of subsea tiebacks to existing infrastructure, those technologies, capabilities, longer reach tiebacks, maximizing economic recovery as the UK targets were. That's some of the biggest changes we've seen in the technology, that we've managed to use assets perhaps that were only designed for 20 or so years, but are now well past 40 years. So we're reaching further into the longer distance tiebacks and into deeper water as well. So that's some of the major things we've seen. And as part of that extension of life for that host facility, we've also had the integrity side of things as well, looking at operations and maintenance, how we maintain the integrity of those assets as well. So that goes for pipelines, flow lines, and around the infrastructure of the host facility as well, making sure that the manifolds, the control systems, etc. And we're also seeing things like enhanced recovery or improved recovery as well, using boosting type technology or subsea processing. All those things have really transformed the industry, I would say, over the past 10 years that I've been in there. But the highs and the lows have been the big challenge. When the oil price drops, then everything starts to get tighter. So we've really got to be sharp with our technology and where we can add value. Because it's not about, I always say, it's not about cutting costs, because the first thing to do, it's easy to cut costs. It's how to actually get more value out of your asset, or how you increase production, because that's where the real value is. It's very easy to slash and burn, but trying to get companies in the sector to work with their client base and their operators to say, look, how can we add value? How can we improve your production? And that's where the real value and the challenge has been exciting.
It seems that the wider subsea industry, or the wider underwater industry in the UK, is really quite big right now.
Yeah, if we look at the underwater industry, and we talk about subsea, and it's in our title, we look at the broader underwater sector. So it's growing very well. Things that have happened are currently going through are I suppose the growth in offshore wind. Think about how much that's transforming the energy transition, as we call it in the UK, this net zero journey that we're embarking on. How do we reduce our carbon footprint? But all those things are contributing to challenges in the underwater sphere. So that's a great, exciting space to be, is how do we maximize that opportunity. Things like offshore wind, which have got very similar challenges, thinking about surveying the seabed, where they're going to lay the cables, is where they're going to lay the pipelines in oil and gas. We think about the future of underwater construction. The historic ones we've seen are fixed to the sea floor, but the future we're going to see floating systems, floating offshore. Now that's very similar to floating structures like FPSOs in oil and gas. So you've got the similar challenge of keeping something on station, but you've also got the anchoring, the positioning, the dynamic cables that go to the seabed. They're very similar technology. So all that's a very exciting place, but it's a transition, and that's one of the key words I always remind. It's not going to happen overnight. This energy transition is going to take some time, but it's very strong in that space. The other spaces that are very interesting as well, because the technologies are very similar, is defense. We see a lot of technology transfer from defense to oil and gas. Also aquaculture, salmon farming in Scotland particularly is a strong export, as well as a whiskey we export from Scotland. But salmon farming, for example, is a very strong commercial part of the export part of UK and Scotland. And if you think about these fish farms, which have floating structures, which have nets that need to be monitored by ROVs, that again, looking at the introduction of technology to look at better efficiency, it's really exciting in there.
Well, on a good day, I'll have a Scottish whiskey or a Scottish farmed fish. On a great day, I'll have both. So that's all good. So Neil, that set us up nicely to talk about the new organization, the Global Underwater Hub. Can you tell us why it's being set up, what backing you have, and what you're hoping to achieve?
Okay, so the Global Underwater Hub has been a project in motion for a few years now. Myself, along with other partners, meaning Subsea UK, along with Scottish Enterprise, which is the enterprise agency for Scottish Government, Opportunity Northeast, which is based in Aberdeen, and the Oil and Gas Authority, created a group to look at how we can really harness what the subsea sector has to offer and what we need for the future. So the challenge was, and a few years back, we looked at Subsea UK has done a great job up until then, but the future is starting to look slightly different. Things are changing, and particularly at this time as well, when we've been through a pandemic, we've been in lockdown. The world, it looks kind of different as we come out. It's almost like coming out of hibernation, I put it. We've seen the energy transition starting. Offshore wind is starting to evolve. There are things like carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen production, all these other opportunities come in. And we looked at the future of saying, well, where does the industry go and what do we need to do? Now, we've got a massive share of the global market, about a third of the global market, if we look at all those subsea sectors. So we looked at the wider blue economy, as we call it, the blue economy, which brings in all aspects to do with the ocean. But we were particularly interested in the part where energy and aquaculture, etc., that we could focus in. Now, according to the OECD reports, that the blue economy is set to grow to about $3 trillion by 2030. That's a massive growth. And of that 3 trillion, there's a 1 trillion, a third is the sectors that we are interested or what we work in the offshore industry. But there's massive growth to be had. And that's the part that we're very interested. Are we set up to get after some of that? Other parts of the world are looking at it. We know countries such as Norway, Japan, Canada, US, etc., are all investing in their ocean economies. And what we have looked at is said, well, we are really a world leader, but we want to make sure that we can maintain being a world leader. So let's get some real focus about the blue economy and how we help create those jobs. That's how do we create the jobs? How do we develop the technology? And how do we encourage the exports? So it's the old adage of how do you create some value for the economy? And looking at what we've done in Subsea UK has been a great story, but really for the future, we need it more broad across different sectors. So working with the defence sector, working with aquaculture, working with the renewable sectors as well as oil and gas, because it's becoming more integrated in energy, thinking about offshore wind and oil and gas around the UK and the North Sea. But some of those other sectors that I mentioned, the technologies are very transferable. So a bit of cooperation, a bit of collaboration and innovation starts to benefit everyone. So we can learn from each other, or we can share costs, or you can improve markets. So that was part of the raison d'etre behind the Global Underwater Hub. Are we fit for the future? Meaning we need to be a bigger organization, which is a new organization, but using the 18 years of, let's say, heritage that's been built in Subsea UK. So more connecting across the UK, across the regions. So we'll have 3 locations, one in Scotland, one in North England, and one in South of England. So that creates a backbone, a hub and spoke model. So anyone around the country can access and connect into that and help them grow their business. So that's the sort of 3 principles of the hub, is to create that access, connect, and grow your business. And we'll do that by delivering sort of 4 key areas around with the hub. So most of the things that companies want to grow their business is to know where the business opportunities are. So market intelligence, both strategic and where the projects are and where the contracts are. So providing a lot of that information is really a valuable thing. What it is not an innovation center, because there are lots of innovation centers around. What we need to do with those innovation centers is make sure that they know where the opportunities are and how to commercialize those opportunities. So we always think one side of it is about maximizing the information that we have and knowing where the opportunities are. And then from the other side is understanding the capability in the country and make sure that they know where there's opportunities. And part of the role of the Global Underwater Hub is to help those companies commercialize and identify and get after those opportunities. So the hub has got a quadrant model, which is essentially built on 4 key things. And that's industry collaboration across those sectors, look at where opportunities may be in other sectors or learning from other sectors, but also finding business in other sectors as well. The other part, number 2, is about capability and skills. So how do we have the right skills within companies, the right education that's going to provide us the skill sets, the resource for the future, but also how do we educate some of those companies to work in different sectors? There's a real challenge that sometimes they work in different sectors and they don't know how to work or how to contract it. So not only the shop floor or the front facing, but perhaps the corporate and the management, different models and different contracting and tendering processes. How do we accelerate and scale up companies? So incubator type programs, helping those companies get to a commercial proposition a lot quicker than a very slow burn on their own. So running these acceleration and scale up programs as well, and helping larger companies look at how they can scale up and diversify into new areas. And the last one is about how do we increase our exports. So we have been working around the world, although we run a whole host of events in the UK, but we also run events in other parts of the world and have that market information around the world. So we've got partnerships in Brazil, US, Mexico, Malaysia, Australia, Japan. So we've got those connections, and it's an important part of that underwater community around the world that we all are connected and are aware of what's going on. So that's some of the main things that the hub will be able to deliver, is help companies identify where the opportunities and help them navigate to find and win that business. And I suppose to go back to the point of what is it the hub will do, but it will really help companies understand what perhaps the confusing future could look like. I mentioned energy transition, all those things as we've come out of almost come out of lockdown, but the future looks kind of different. We've got energy transition, net zero, oil and gas, offshore wind. There's quite a number of things for companies, but it's for us to try and help articulate what the opportunities are and help companies make those strategic decisions where they invest and where they want to do business.